Hi guys, here we're back in California. We have a little something for you. Ready?
Gangnam Style.
Gangnam Style.
Gangnam Style.
Thank you to our two studios in South Korea. Thank you to Dr. Rowe at the Korean Pilates Federation and to Hyunjung Lee from E Pilates. It's such a pleasure to have you guys come and teach for us, and such an honor to be representing Balanced Body in South Korea, which is such an amazing, active, lively, and vibrant Pilates market.
Absolutely.
Woohoo. Next, we have to introduce our dear friend, Audrey Dakota from the Moving Body in Singapore.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you guys.
Her workshop is going to be moving at the right frequency. And she would also like you to have perhaps some props near you. So any myofascial release tools, rollers, a bottle, tennis balls, a yoga block, band, and a towel. So some version of those, if you can gather those up now, that would be great. And Singapore's been an interesting market. Pilates has been there for quite a long time, right? Audrey, how long have you been doing Pilates now?
My studio has been open now. The 11th year is coming to 11 this year already. And prior to that, Pilates has been there for more than 10 years. So it's been around for a while.
That's
and I know some elders. I know Ron Fletcher was there, and I know Herb has been there. And so I know it sort of started very early, which is interesting. And it's done really, really well. I think Pilates is very popular there, and it's done a fantastic job. And we really look forward to having you carry on. So thank you very much, Audrey, for being with us, and take it away.
Thanks, Audrey.
Thanks very much.
Audrey,
enjoy.
Thank you. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. All right. So just as Nora had mentioned, you're going to need a myofascial release tool. So whether it's a roller or a ball, okay, or even just a rolled up flask. So you take a flask, a metal bottle or a glass bottle that's pretty sturdy, roll it up with a towel and tie some bands around it. That would be quite an effective tool. Okay. If you've got a band, okay, I'd like you to have a long band, okay, if possible. And if you have two bands, a long band would be great, as well as another band where you tie into a loop, okay? If you only have one band, I'm gonna ask you to tie your band into a loop right now. And the loop has to be small enough so that it can fit between the shins, okay? It can go between the shins, it can go between the ankles, it can go around the thighs as well. All right, so I'm just gonna give you a little bit of time to put that around, okay? I'm just gonna check my view here and get myself into the right view so I can see. All right, great. Okay, so today we're gonna talk about moving at the right frequency. So as Pilates teachers, we are always assessing our clients. We are assessing their posture. We're assessing the way they move, and we are looking at their movement patterns. And oftentimes we find that they have movement patterns that we want to improve. We want to help them improve. Behind a movement pattern that needs improvement is usually a muscle imbalance. And what is a muscle imbalance? It's really common for us to think about muscle imbalance in terms of strong muscles versus weak muscles. Well, I like to think about a muscle imbalance in terms of a dominant muscle versus an inhibited muscle. So a dominant muscle tends to be hyperactive, it's hypertonic, tends to be short and tight. And most importantly, it actually exerts a greater influence over inhibited muscles. The inhibited or weak muscle tends to be undertoned. It's kind of sluggish. It's not very active, it's underactive. And oftentimes it tends to be lengthened. And it's quite common that your postural muscles tend to be inhibited muscles. Not all the time, but it's quite often that you have the case. So that's on a neuromuscular level. But if you think about the nervous system and the relationship of muscles and the brain, we also need to look at muscle imbalances in terms of the nervous system. So if you think about a stereo equalizer, all right, think of dominant muscles as muscles that are tuned up really high on the stereo equalizer. They send lots of signals. They're really spontaneous. They're very active, and they're always sending lots of signals to the brain. It's like, okay, I want to do it. I want to do this movement. Really spontaneous, and they're like cheerleaders. And think of inhibited muscles as the, okay, I guess if you need me to work now, I'll work now. All right. So in terms of the communication with the brain, inhibited muscles tend to not have a very strong signal with the brain. And so this cycle, this loop keeps going. All right. When you have very dominant muscles that are super hyperactive, they have a strong communication signal with the brain. They're always volunteering. And the brain is like, the brain doesn't choose muscles. It chooses stimulation. It goes by stimulation. It responds according to the stimulation it receives. So if a muscle is giving it a lot of feedback, it's going to use that muscle to execute movements all the time. And if it's not receiving a lot of signals from other muscles, from inhibited muscles, it doesn't call upon the inhibited muscles all the time. So when you want to address a muscle imbalance, you have to think of it in two ways. Yes, I want to strengthen the weak muscles and also release the strong muscles, but I also have to think about the neuromuscular level. How am I going to effect change in the nervous system so that I can reset the way that muscles communicate with the brain? And that's what the session's about today. So our strategy today for muscle imbalances is to first give the muscle, or rather give the brain proprioception. We want to give it more information about what's happening in the muscles. And the best way to do that is to start with myofascial release. When we do myofascial release, the pressure and the rolling is actually stimulating proprioceptors that are embedded in our muscles. And it sends messages, it sends afferent messages, afferent feedback to the brain so that the brain is actually updating its information about that part of the body. When you go on, after you've done your myofascial stretch, you go on and stretch your muscle, that particular muscle that is dominant. You're also stimulating muscle spindles that actually give more information to the brain about the length of the muscle. All right. And after we've done that, once we've updated the information about that particular joint in the brain, then we go on to activate the inhibited muscles, and we try and teach strengthening muscles, that strengthening exercises that will actually activate inhibited muscles and improve the communication between the inhibited muscle and the brain. Okay, so let's begin. I'm going to start today by introducing you a couple of imbalances in the lower body and a couple of imbalances in the upper body. And we're going to start with the lower body first. So you're going to need your roller and you're going to need this loop that I was talking about. But first, we're going to start with a test activity. And I want you to tune in and think about how you're feeling and how you're performing the activity. So I'm going to get all of you to come to a standing position. All right. Now, today you have to remember which leg you're working. So I'm going to choose, you can decide which one you want to choose, but I'm going to choose my right leg. All right. And later on, when we go to the upper body, you have to work the opposite arm from the leg that you worked. So let's first start off by coming into a standing balance position on each leg. All right. Feel as you shift your weight from one side to the other, how the weight shift feels. And now also take note of how you're balancing on each foot. So I'm going to work on the right leg, and now I'm going to hop. Okay, hop on the spot. I want you to hop forward. Try that again. And now hop side to side. Just remember how that feels now, because we're going to reassess. Stay in a standing position, and I want you to do a single leg squat. One more. Okay, let's begin. All right, so remember that. Keep a mental note of how that test activity felt. We're going to start off with the first muscle imbalance. The first muscle imbalance in the hip is when the tensor fascia lata gets very dominant, and it actually dominates the gluteus medius in hip stability. Now, the TFL, the tensor fascia lata, is actually one of the muscles that controls the IT band from the front. All right, it's a pretty short muscle that lives here. All right, and it actually attaches onto the femur bone, and it also attaches into the IT band. It's responsible for flexion, internal rotation, as well as abduction. So as you can see, it's got many complex activities that it's responsible for, and it tends to overpower the gluteus medius. So what we're going to do, all right, is usually when you see a client has this imbalance, when you see them squat, there's a tendency for the thighs will actually rotate. You'll see internal rotation. All right. So the knees will actually come in and they tend to pronate. Also, in a standing leg, a single standing leg, when they stand, the opposite hip will drop, which is actually a very clear sign of weakness in the glute medius on the standing leg. So these are a couple of features to look out for when you're looking for the TFL dominant over the glute medius. So we're going to start off first by releasing the TFL. I'm going to teach you how to find your TFL. So put your finger on your ASIS, go 3 fingers down from the ASIS, and then go 2 fingers out. And this is the ballpark area where you'll find your TFL. Now, all of us are built differently, so you have to find it. The other way to find your TFL is to internally rotate your thigh. When you internally rotate, you are actually activating your TFL. All right, so let's go ahead. Remember, we're only going to work on this particular leg, and all our lower body imbalances will be on the same leg today. So go ahead and grab your myofascial release tool. I want you to angle your body slightly towards the floor, and we're going to look for the TFL where our fingers were earlier. Now, the TFL, it tends to get dominant quite easily in people who have injuries in the knee or in the ankle that weren't rehabilitated properly. All right, and you always find that runners and also people who sit for long periods of time tend to have a very shortened TFL. When you're doing myofascial release, all right, think about the discomfort that you're feeling on a scale of 1 to 10. All right, usually you'll find that the tenderness, anything that exceeds 6 upon 10, 7 or 8, it shouldn't feel sharp or unbearable. It feels kind of tender, all right, and bearable. And when you're doing your release, remember to breathe, allow your weight to sink into your myofascial release tool. And once you feel that the discomfort drops to about a level of 4 upon 10, you can come off. You don't need to wait till it's completely relaxed. As long as you feel some dissipation, that's fine. Okay, if there's a particular point that's really tender, I want you to just rotate forward and rotate back. So we're going to cross fiber it. So remember that when we're trying to increase proprioception to the brain, you really need to give the brain variety. So don't always just move in one particular direction, but you want to actually move in a variety of directions to try and stimulate as many proprioceptors as possible to give more information to the brain. All right, when we are doing proprioceptive release, we're actually trying to think of your mobile phone. It's like you're trying to update your app in your phone so that your brain gets more information and can form a new image of that particular part of the body. Okay, so I think we're released by now, all right? And the TFL should be released, and we're going to go for a stretch. So after you've released, you have to stretch, and this is the leg we're stretching. So you're going to come into a kneeling position, flatten the ankle if you can. If not, you can tuck your toes under. We're going to start with a posterior pelvic tilt, and then we're going to lean forward into the stretch. Already, you should be feeling a stretch here. I'm going to breathe in, and as I breathe out, I'm going to continue to posteriorly tilt and turn away from the leg that I'm stretching. And you should be feeling a pretty deep stretch around here. This is where the TFL is. Let's take 3 deep breaths here. And you can sink deeper into the stretch if you like. So I'm bending my knee and leaning forward into the stretch even more. And one last breath here. And release. And we're going to come out of that position. Okay, so we've released it, we've stretched it, and now we're going to strengthen the gluteus medius on this side. So we're going to take our band and we're going to lie down. First, I want you to take the band and place it around the thighs. Okay, so to strengthen the gluteus medius, there's lots of Pilates exercises that we know to strengthen the glute medius. However, the best way to strengthen, the most effective kind of exercise to strengthen your gluteus medius is an exercise that involves external rotation, it's weight bearing, as well as a hip neutral position. So you have to do the exercise in the hip neutral. Okay, so we're gonna lie down. I'm placing my feet in external rotation on the ground. I'm turned out, arms by my side. I'm just going to push gently into the band. So there's a little bit of abduction here. I'm going to keep a neutral pelvis. So my hands are on my pelvis. I'm going to lift my hips straight up. And this is the start position. I'm in hip neutral, external rotation, and weight bearing. So to warm up the muscle, you can actually start by pulsing, tiny pulses up towards the ceiling. And as I'm pulsing, I'm pushing out against the band. Now, because I want to strengthen mostly my right side, I'm not moving my left leg. I'm pushing my right leg against the band. So remember, I want you to strengthen only one side of your glute medius. Choose the side that you're strengthening and just keep pushing that thigh out against the band. The other leg that you're not focusing on, it just stays still and stabilizes. All right, now stop pulsing for a moment. I'm going to progress this exercise. Now I want you to raise the heel of the foot that you're not working on. This is the guy that we don't want to strengthen for now. I'm strengthening the right leg. So now I'm going to pulse with most of my weight in my right heel. And I'm feeling my right gluteus medius doing more work. And if you feel strong enough, go ahead, take a breath, lift this leg up and continue to pulse up and down on that standing leg. And by now, your gluteus medius should be talking to you. 4, 3, 2, 1, and lower. And slowly bridging down, coming out of that position. So there's lots of other exercises in the Pilates repertoire that you can use to strengthen your glute medius. Standing slides on the reformer, and even on the mat, you've got your kneeling side kicks. This one, okay? And just making sure that you're in external rotation and your weight bearing into the knee, keeping in hip neutral. You can also strengthen the glute medius with this exercise. Okay, good. So that is your muscle imbalance in the hip. And now we're going to move on to the knee. So a common muscle imbalance in the knee is when the lateral quads dominate the vastus medialis oblique. Your vastus medialis oblique has got the greatest influence on bringing your patella into the right position. And where do we want our patella? We want our patella to be sitting in the center of the knee joint, where the patellar femoral tract is. So as you bend your knee, your patella is supposed to be moving, right, down and up in the center of the knee joint. Oftentimes, when you're really tight in the IT band, you're tight in your TFL or your lateral quads, these have an influence on your patella and they pull the patella out. So what this imbalance looks like in clients is when they bend their knee, it's not an internal rotation, but you see the knees kind of drifting inwards towards each other. They are adducting, all right? The other thing you'll see is they'll complain of anterior knee pain as well. Or sometimes when you see them bend their knee, they're wobbling a little bit, all right? Because there is a little bit of instability around this area. This is too weak and this is too strong. Okay, so how are we gonna release that? So we're gonna start first with myofascial release on the lateral quads. We're going to start from just above the kneecap and we're going to go all the way up. The other thing I need to mention is, you can't really see on me, but look at your clients. You will see that if there's an imbalance in the lateral quads and the VMO, because these guys are, you'll see that they're really developed on the outside of the thigh. The muscles here are really strong and the muscles here are really small. So if you look, just kind of visually looking at it, you'll see that they're much stronger and much more built up on the outside and much less on the inside. And the other thing is the kneecap, the patella, is probably going to turn out or it's going to move laterally and it'll be somewhere higher up as well because it's being pulled up this way. So we're going to go for the release. I'm going to start, again, same as before. I'm angling my body slightly downwards, but I'm starting just above my kneecap. I'm not putting any weight. Remember which leg you have to strengthen. We're not going to change legs yet. So I'm not putting any weight on the leg that I'm releasing, and I'm just slowly going to go slowly from the top of the knee all the way towards the TFL. Now, usually in the studio, I will take 3 passes, really slow passes, to allow my body to absorb the information as I'm rolling. I know it can be quite uncomfortable to be rolling this area. Remember, try not to be completely on your side because we're trying to release the lateral quads, not the IT band. Okay, I want you to already sense where is the most tender part of this muscle. Where does it feel most uncomfortable? And you're going to stay there and you're going to slowly bend the knee. And you're going to find at which angle that I bend my knee do I feel discomfort or the most tightness. And once you feel that, okay, this is where it feels the tightest, you're going to cross fiber and rotate. All right, this can be pretty uncomfortable for some clients. So remember to watch their faces, see how they're reacting. And if it's too much, you don't have to do a cross fiber. Just do a simple pass from up and down along the leg. Good, so remember, just looking for quality change. You don't have to release it until it's fully released. Just looking for quality change and about 2 levels of dissipation of that discomfort. And then you're gonna come off. All right, and then we're going to stretch the lateral quads. So one way to stretch, okay, there's a couple of ways to stretch. One way is to go into the lunge position with the posterior tilt, all right, and you can hold on to the leg. Okay, it can be pretty intense for the knee, so be careful. The other option that I really like is to actually place a pad on the ground and have a box or even a wall behind me. And I'm going to place my ankle on the box. I come into a lunge position and I just lean back slowly. So I can actually control this movement, all right, by placing my hands on the box to assist me. And I get a nice opening across the shoulders. And just rotating my body from one side or to the other, I get to actually stretch the whole spectrum of my quads just by rotating my body. Okay, and then slowly coming out of this position. All right, that was the stretch. And now we're going to go into the strengthening of the VMO. So we're going to pick up that band again. And this time, in the first exercise for the glute medius, our band was above the kneecap. Now, when we're strengthening the VMO, I want you to bring the band just underneath the kneecap, just below the patella. This is where it's going to be. Good. Okay, if you have a wall nearby, you can lean against the wall to keep yourself in a chair position, in a seated position, or you can just do a plie, a knee bend, keeping your body as upright as you can. And I want you to do tiny pulses. So remember to step your feet far enough to already engage the resistance band as you bend your knees, and you're just going to pulse. And sometimes, because these guys tend to be inhibited and a little bit sluggish, all right, I already tap the inside of my knee to give some information to the muscle that, hey, you have to wake up, okay? And I'm pulsing, okay? So right now, focus on just pulsing the leg that you want to work on, the leg that we are actually working on more here. So I'm just focusing on the right leg. That's the leg I'm working on. Make sure that the ball of your foot stays planted in the ground. And you should be starting to feel a little bit of a burning sensation here. This would be a baseline, simple beginner level exercise. And then I can go into a single leg stance and I'm going to do knee bends. So what this back leg is doing is providing a pull of resistance inwards. I'm using this leg to pull the resistance band so that I feel this burning sensation or this activation of the VMO on the inside of the quads. If you want to take it a little higher, you can go into your scooter variations. So of course, scooter will be a great exercise when we're back in the studios using the reformer. And as a trainer, you can hold onto the band, give medial resistance as the client is doing scooter. All right, and right about now, you should be feeling quite a lot of work going on here. Yes, if you like to work with sliders, it's also possible to go into a squat position and you're sliding the towel. And you can slide your towel diagonally forward, to the side, and even behind. Or you can take it into all fours. So it's kind of interesting that once you find, it's actually good to experiment working on that muscle in different directions, in different positions. So again, you're updating the brain with new information of how the muscle works when the body is in different positions and in different relationship to gravity. So another idea is to come into an all fours position, and I'm coming up and hovering my knees because I'm working on my right leg only my right leg is pushing out against the band. Of course, you have the option of doing both legs pushing against the band. All right. And also I can do scooter here, stretching the leg out and in. So my right leg has to stabilize as my left leg is moving out and in. So this already reminds me of single leg jackrabbits as well as jackrabbits with a band around my shins. Good. And then coming down and out of this position. Let's take a break, walk around the room and see how the leg you've been working on is feeling right now. We've already worked on the hip. We've already worked on the knee. And just standing on both legs, does it feel different? Just walking around the room, how is it feeling? One more muscle imbalance in the lower body. We're going to focus now on the ankle. So it's really common that we find that clients come in through the door and they have pronation. So a common muscle imbalance when you see pronated feet is the peroneals are overactive, they're dominant, and they actually dominate the tibialis posterior, which are the muscles on the inside of the shin. So when these muscles get really strong, there's a tendency to cause the arch to drop. When these muscles are strong on the inside of the shin, they actually pull and lift the arch up. Okay? All right. So we're going to start now by releasing the peroneals on the outside, and we're going to strengthen the tibialis posterior. Usually, when you see someone with this imbalance, there's a couple of things you'll see. Even though the knee is pointing forward, you see that the foot is actually turned out a little. And you see there's a collapse and a pronation in the arch. The inside of the arch is dropping down. And the other thing you'll see is that when you put their foot in a neutral position, it's difficult for them to actually dorsiflex. You don't see a real movement in the ankle joint as they lean the knee forward over the toes. It's difficult. They can't keep good alignment when they're doing that. It's very stiff. They'll kind of, if I put them in front of a wall and I say, I want you to bring your knee to the wall. The toes are against the wall. And I say, I want you to bring your knee to the wall. They'll stop halfway and say, I can't reach the wall. My ankle is stuck. So this is a common feature of this imbalance. So we're going to release it. Sometimes I find that the peroneals, even though they're tight, and when you release it on the foam roller, it doesn't feel like it's very tight, but it does something. So your peroneals run from the lateral malleolus all the way up to this round bony portion here. Can you feel this little round bone? That's your head of your fibula. Okay, so I'm going to lie. So remember which leg to work on. I'm starting to sound a little bit naggy here, am I? Okay, you're going to place the outside of your shin on the roller. Okay, and then from here, I'm going to straighten my leg. I'm going to actually angle my body forward slightly again because the peroneal sits slightly anterior to the shin. Okay, and you're going to move from the ankle all the way to the head of the fibula. Now, there's a couple of other options with the peroneals. If you feel that you're not feeling a lot of release, or sometimes you have something like a roller stick, you can also roll or even just use your hands. Or sometimes just using your hands to travel down, you can actually feel the muscle tension just using your hands to kind of massage down from the ankle all the way up to the head of the fibula. Tapping it will already give it some proprioception. So if you don't have a myofascial release tool, even just using your hands can also update your brain about your body. Okay, so that's that. I've released that now. And one way to stretch the peroneals is to actually take your ankle and you're flexing it and you're going to turn the ankle towards the ceiling. So I'm going to invert my foot. And I feel the stretch on the outside here. And release. Okay, so now we're going to strengthen the tibialis posterior, the inside of the ankle. So I'm going to take my band. I'm going to place my band at my ankles. And I'm going to stand with my feet far apart enough to put a constant stretch in the band. Not too much, but it's constantly engaged. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to lift the toes up. You can do all your Pilates toe exercises and foot exercises here. Okay, I'm sure all of us have a huge toolbox of foot exercises. So the idea is to do all the foot exercises you have in your repertoire with resistance coming from inside. Okay, and be very aware of these muscles here getting activated as you're doing your foot exercises. So whether it's lifting my toes, playing the piano with my toes, all right, it all works. Just lifting the big toes off the ground, just lifting the little toes off the ground. All right, if I'm sitting on a chair, you can also go ahead and do inchworms, all right, by getting the arch to activate. Another thing I can do is I can also balance on one foot and do heel raises. So what I'm doing is I'm actually, again, using this leg, the floating leg, to exert some resistance from the inside so that as I lift my heel up, it helps me activate all the muscles on the inside of the shin more. And I'm giving myself more challenge by doing this on the mat and, of course, increasing proprioception at the same time. So you can progress the exercise from on the floor and then slowly progress to standing on the mat to give some challenge to your clients. Okay, good. So we're coming out of that position. We've done all 3 muscle imbalances in the lower body now. Are you ready? Walk around first and just notice how you're feeling right now. And come back to your starting point. Let's retest. Okay, so stand on the leg that you've been working on. Notice how your balance feels. Stand on the other leg. Notice how your balance feels. Now think about the way you're changing weight from one leg to the other. And is that different now? I'm going to go back to the leg that I've been working on, and we're going to do knee bends. Single knee bends. Should be feeling pretty stable on this leg. And then compare that to the other side that you haven't been working on. How is your knee moving as you bend your knee? Back to the leg that we worked. Hopping. Forward and back. Let's hop side to side. Compare it to the leg that you haven't worked. And now side to side. Ooh, nearly lost balance there. Can you feel the difference? All right, so I'm going to move on now to the upper body. For the upper body, you're going to need your roller still, and now you need a long band. So if you tie your band into a loop and you're using the same one, go ahead and untie your band now, because we're going to need a long loop for the upper body exercises. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the shoulder. So here I have scapula and my humerus. So when we are working with the shoulder joint, it's really important to think about the position of the scapula as well as where your head of your humerus is sitting in the shoulder socket. Okay, so some of the common muscle imbalances that we're going to talk about today will affect the position of the scapula. So the first imbalance I'm going to talk about is tightness in the pec minor. All right, and sometimes tightness in the pec minor will actually cause the scapula to tilt forward. It can even cause the scapula to protract and even rotate inwards. So if you think about your shoulder joint is a little bit like a house. Can you see the roof of the house? All right, this is your acromion, it's the roof of the house. This is the space underneath the roof, and this is the floor of your house. And you've got muscles and tissues that live between the roof of the house and the floor of the house. Now, if the position of your scapula was not ideal and it started to tilt forward, what happens is that the people who live in the house, the muscles and tissues that sit between these two bones have less space to live in. They complain because there's no space to live. Okay, so one of the muscle imbalances we're going to talk about today in the shoulder is the pec minor being tight. your pec minor actually attaches onto your coracoid process, okay? Sits on your coracoid process and attaches down to the 3rd and 5th rib. So if that gets really tight, it tends to pull the scapula forward. And sometimes you see that when they're standing in a neutral position, when their arm is just hanging, you see that the scapula is already winging because the pec is actually tight and pulling the scapula forward. And this sometimes gives less space between the head of the humerus and the acromion, all right? And you find that you have shoulder impingement. Before your arm has reached a 30-degree angle, the shoulder is already starting to elevate. So these are some of the common features that you see with this imbalance. The shoulder is coming up, even in a small range of motion. And you also see that they tend to be slightly kyphotic. And they have pain. They complain of pain the moment they raise their arm above 30 degrees. All right, so that's one of the things we're going to talk about. So right now, before we begin on addressing the imbalances, we're going to do a test for the upper body. So everyone's going to come into an all-fours position. Okay, you're going to do a single arm raise and notice how that feels. Okay, now remember, think about which leg you have worked on. The arm that you work on is the opposite arm now. Now we're going to come into a kneeling plank. Think about which arm you're working. I'm going to be working my left arm today. And then challenge yourself even further and do a single arm raise in a plank position. And notice how that feels. And we'll come back to this in a while. All right, so we're going to release the pec minor. All right, you can certainly use a roller and roll anywhere between the 3rd and 5th rib. So it's around from the nipple line all the way up to the collarbone, and it goes at an angle this way. Now, how you can find your coracoid process is also to think about going all the way from the collarbone, walking to the end of the collarbone, and you find your acromion, right? And then from there, just kind of dropping down, and you'll find a little knob here, just right under the acromion. Now, and how you find the acromion is when you swing your arm back, you'll feel that the coracoid process will protrude into your finger. And when you bring your arm behind, it moves away from your finger. So very slowly, try and look for that. There's a little round bone that comes forward when your elbow goes behind. And then when you bring your elbow this way, it moves away from your finger. And that's your coracoid process. So you can use your roller to roll. I prefer to use my hands to actually feel that. I move diagonally down and allow my hands to move down along my ribs. And I find little tender points along the way, moving down towards the sternum. Okay, so remember to decide which side of your arm you're working. So I'm actually supposed to be working this side. So I'm going to be releasing this side now because I worked on my right leg. Breathe normally. Relax your jaw. Okay, any tender points? I want you to spend a little bit of time in that area. Breathe deeply and release and massage any of the knots out. Okay, you can also tap up and down to give it some feedback. And relax. Okay, good. So from here, we can also go into a stretch. Okay, so to stretch the chest, okay, I'm going to use the floor because I don't have a wall near me. So I'm going to keep my arms straight along the line of my chest, along the line of my shoulders. And now I'm going to press my hand down into the wall. I'm going to turn away from the arm. Take one more breath. Turn a little more and lower your shoulder down to the ground more. And slowly coming out of this position. Okay, so when the pec minor gets really tight, what happens is it tends to dominate over the lower traps. And the lower trap's job is actually to keep the tip of the scapula down, sitting on the rib cage. That's one of the things it does. It actually has to stabilize the scapula as the arm starts to move up. Okay, so we're going to do an exercise to strengthen the lower trap. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to sit at an angle so you can see me. You're going to take your band and you're going to take your band and place it over the front of your feet. And you're going to loop it around your feet, around the underside of your feet. And then from there, I'm going to cross the straps. So I'm only working on my left arm. So I'm going to just keep my right arm here down so that it's just stabilizing the band for me. And then I'm going to pull with my left arm. Now, as I pull, I'm thinking about keeping my elbow really close to my ribs. It's not a wide roll, it's actually a narrow roll. So this is what it's going to look like. I actually, after I've done this myofascial release, manual release on my chest, I'm kind of keeping a mental note of these muscles being very awake. And as I pull and keep my elbow close to my body, I want to feel my chest stretch when my elbow goes back. So keep the elbow really close to the ribs and pull back. Now, if you want to activate the muscle even more and also get the serratus anterior working, another way to do this is to keep your palm facing down at the start of the movement and now rotate and pull the palm, turn the palm up towards the ceiling. So I'm going to supinate my palm or supinate my hand as I pull it back. You're going to do 3 more here. So remember, the idea is to feel that you're really lengthening through this area as you pull back. You can even add in a rotation to get some spine mobility. So wherever you can, with all your activation exercises for the inhibited muscles, try and get some kind of mobility in the joint going or mobility in the spine. Because for proprioception or for more proprioception to happen in the brain, you also need mobility and glide in the tissues so that more signals can be sent to the brain. Last one, and release. Okay, so you should have felt while you were doing that roll that there's an opening in the chest and that you are also activating muscles here right at the tip of the scapula. All right, so now we're going to move on to the second imbalance. The second imbalance in the shoulder is quite similar. Most of the time, these two imbalances tend to come together, but it's very often that the chest pec minor tends to be tight because we do a lot of activities with our arms in front of our body, and there's a greater tendency for us to be bending over our activities, whether it's our desk, our steering wheel, our bicycles. So it's quite common, more common to have the pec minor tight. All right, but the next imbalance I'm going to talk about also comes together with the pec minor tightness. So the second imbalance in the shoulder that I'm going to talk about is actually a rotator cuff imbalance. So you have your external rotators that sit at the back, your infraspinators and your teres minor, and they're responsible for externally rotating the arm bone in the socket. And you also have your subscapularis. Your subscapularis sits on the front of the scapula and attaches to the head of the humerus. Now, I think in Pilates, a lot of times we have this tendency to avoid doing too much internal rotation because we have the impression that it will pull the arm forward. Okay, but that's actually not the case, because when the subscapularis is activated, it actually internally rotates the head of the humerus within the socket. So it actually keeps it more congruent in the socket. So if you look at shoulder stability, the subscapularis is actually one of the most important muscles in the rotator cuff group because one, it actually has a direct pull of pulling the head of the humerus into the socket. It also has a downward depression effect. It actually pulls the head of the humerus down in the socket and it allows it to roll as the arm goes up. However, if your external rotators at the back are tight and they actually tend to inhibit the movement of the head of the humerus. In fact, when you have very tight external rotators, the head of the humerus is not able to roll downwards. They dominate the subscapularis and the arm is not able to roll upwards. And most times you'll find that the head of the humerus starts to shear forward when the external rotators at the back are too tight. Okay, so we're going to address this imbalance by first releasing the infraspinators and the teres minor, and then we're going to strengthen your subscapularis. A lot of times you will find that someone who has this imbalance of external rotators, strong external rotators, is when they're standing, the elbow is behind the line of the body. So you'll see that the arm is bent and the arm is sitting somewhere behind here. The other telltale sign is when they're doing a pulling exercise, you'll see that the whole head of the humerus will actually lurch forward. When they pull, this is happening. All right, so then you know that you've got to go in there, you've got to release the external rotators, and you have to strengthen the subscapularis, which lives around here at the front of your scapula. So when you're really working your subscapularis, the sensation is of suction. It's almost like you feel like you're suctioning the head of the humerus into the arm. Okay, so we're going to start off with the release. Okay, remember which arm you're working on. I keep forgetting that I'm working on my left side. So when you're releasing your teres minor and your infraspinatus, you need to be lying on the lateral border of your scapula. So that's how I'm going to position myself. I'm going to keep my knees bent. I'm going to rest myself on the lateral border. I'm going to have my hands behind my head, and I'm going to roll up and down. Now, I like this movement because it's getting some lateral flexion in my spine and some mobility in my thoracic spine as well. Okay, it can be quite tender, so just be gentle with your clients. Maybe start with a slightly lighter roller at first. Okay, and when I find a particular spot that's kind of tender, I'm going to actually allow myself to rotate forward and rotate up towards the ceiling. And rotating forward and rotating up towards the ceiling. And slowly coming out of this position when you feel that the tissue has changed and it's not so tight anymore. All right, good. So now to stretch the teres minor, obviously the external rotators, we're going to go into internal rotation. So you're going to have a seat. Okay, you can sit on the ground if you have flexible hamstrings. And if not, I want you to sit on your roller. Okay, you can also sit on a box. Same thing, I'm going to put my band over my feet, come underneath, and I'm going to cross them. So when I think about internal rotation, a good angle for you to really be able to activate your subscapularis is to make sure that your arm is in 30 degrees angle of scaption. So you actually want to, if you want to get good activation of your subscapularis, you don't want your arm to be very close to your body. It needs to be away from your body. So when I'm doing the exercise, I want to think about having my hand coming to my navel. I'm pulling the band to my navel, and my elbow is reaching out. As I exhale, I'm only pulling the band on that arm that I've chosen to work on for this session. I'm pulling the hand to my belly button and reaching my elbow out. One more to go. Okay, and when I'm doing that, okay, as a trainer, you should be actually cueing into your clients to be feeling some work coming from the armpit, and you'll actually see that in the skin around the armpit area hollows out, and it looks like it's suctioning the arm into the socket as they pull the band in. And if you're doing the exercise with me now, just go ahead and put your hand right here in the underarm area and see if you feel any activation there, right at the front surface of your scapula. One more to go. And release. Okay, so we haven't done much extension in this session. All right, so with regards to the shoulder, some exercises in a prone position that I find are really effective in strengthening the lower traps would be mini swans. So another way to actually activate your lower traps is to actually come into a diagonal swan position where my hands are in a V, and I'm going to drag my elbows in and come up into extension, resting on my pubic bone as I come up, and I slowly go back down. And the intention is to think about dragging my elbows in towards my navel, coming up in extension. I get to work my back extensors, my middle back, and I'm also activating my lower traps to pull my shoulder blades down. So if I'm just working on that one arm, I can do a single arm version with the other arm reaching behind, and that increases my stability challenge as well. And I'm gonna do one more here. And going down and release. Okay, with my band, to work the subscapularis, think about your double leg kick arms. So with the double leg kick arms, I'm going to actually hold on to my band and I'm keeping my hands pretty close. I'll show you. Keeping it pretty close, not too far apart, okay? Because I actually need to keep my band engaged all the time as I'm doing the exercise. So holding on to your band, I want you to straighten your arm and already engage the band when your arm is straight and come into extension. Now, when I come down and I bend my elbows, I'm going to stretch the band even more and open my elbows to the side. Exhale up. Internally rotate my upper arm bone and come down, opening the elbows to the side. So the emphasis of the exercise is actually coming down and opening the elbows and feeling the internal rotation in the shoulder when I bend my elbows to the side and go into the diamond shape. Last one, stretch, pull the band, come down and pull the band even more. Yeah, as I was doing the exercise, I felt there was a lot of activation going on around the entire shoulder socket. All right, so these are our two imbalances in the upper body. So now it's time to test them. Okay, so put your mat back in place. Let's go back to our test exercise. So coming into a kneeling position, just in quadruped. Let's raise one arm. And now we're gonna raise the other arm that we worked on. Okay, try that one more time. Put your weight on the arm that you have worked on and notice how you feel because you're stabilizing on the arm you worked on. And now raise the other arm. Now raise the arm that you worked on and you're balancing your weight on the arm you haven't worked on and notice what difference there is between the two limbs. Let's take it a notch further and go into kneeling plank. Same thing, I'm going to raise the arm I didn't work and balance on the arm that I just worked on. And now I'm going to raise the arm that I worked on, and I'm going to balance on the arm I didn't work on. Feel that difference. Taking this into a plank position, raise the arm you didn't work on, challenge the arm that you just activated, and now try it with the arm that you worked on and see how you're holding yourself up. Now let's take this even further and think about challenging our slings. Remember which leg you worked on and the opposite arm that you worked on. I want you to keep the limbs that you have worked on the floor, and you're gonna slowly float the opposite limbs that you haven't worked on. Notice your stability and down. And let's try the other side now. Notice your stability. And what's the difference there? It's hard for both sides, but is one side more stable and more manageable than the other? And down. Okay, so at the end of the day, just working specifically at the joints, but yet working the whole body at once also shows you the relationship that every part of your body has with the other. Even though I may have an imbalance in the hip or imbalance in the shoulder, it's going to affect my whole body movement. So that's all the time I have for today. And I hope that you took away some interesting nuggets of information from this session. And I've inspired you to look into your trainer's toolbox to find other exercises in your movement repertoire that can help address these imbalances. So remember, when you're looking for exercises or you're programming exercises to help change muscle imbalances in your client, remember to give proprioception. You also want to focus on giving exercises that have variability and progression, so always challenge the tissue. Now, some of the exercises today and the strategy we're using seems like, wow, it's really effective. I can feel a change really quickly. But really, to achieve true change in the tissue, you need to have about 6 to 12 months of consistency and repetition, good repetition and good movement patterns to actually change tissue. So I hope you enjoyed your session with me today. And if anyone has any questions, please go to the event chat and you can post your questions there, or you can look me up at the Movement Academy in Singapore. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe, stay home, and we'll see you sometime soon.